Okay, so the news is right now that the government has asked OpenAI to hold back GPT 5.6 after also the government has asked Anthropic, or basically strong-armed Anthropic, to pulling Mythos and Fable. Now, that's the framing, and I'm just going to assume that most everyone is up to speed with that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what I kind of think the implications are. And I have a rule of thumb where if, lots of people ask me about the same thing, then that's generally a good sign, like, I should talk about this. So basically 3 different people have asked me, like, where do I think this is going? So what I want to do is talk about what the implications of this are from my perspective. Don't consider this like a formal, like, prediction or anything like that. Because obviously things change, and there is lots of uncertainty. But with that being said, many people are pointing back to Leopold Aschenbrenner's big debut with his situational awareness paper, where he said that in 2026 or 2027, the government would start restricting access to frontier models. Now, that some people are casting that as basically like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Like there was he's some genie who's predicting the future. But remember that the Effective Altruist Group has been calling for regulation for quite a while. And there's been plenty of cases in history of technologies getting, export controls and that sort of thing. So the timing was pretty good, but it was not like a categorical thing that nobody could have seen coming. So there's that. That's one part that I want to address about just kind of where the chips are settling. But really, I want to break it down into kind of what are the possible outcomes that I see from what's going on here. So when we actually look at the way that the social media landscape is reacting, lots and lots of people are, I don't want to say up in arms about it. Most, like the prevailing sentiment is actually one of frustration or disappointment. People are like, oh, I warned about this, and the government's going to hold us back, and you're going to be a member of the permanent underclass, and that sort of thing. And honestly, I don't necessarily think it's going to go for like, oh, this is a temporary blip, or it's a permanent slowdown, or that sort of thing. What I see happening is actually a bifurcation, and this is arguably worse, and this is what a lot of people have predicted. So again, this is not me like coming up with something in a vacuum, but when Anthropic, they had Mythos was like the frontier maximally capable model, and then Fable was like the watered down version for the rest of us. And I think that that's probably going to be the way of the future, where companies, they have their kind of frontier flagship model that is reserved for security clearance uses, government and military uses, and also top paying corporate uses, just because they're going to be more expensive. You're going to have more strict export requirements so that you know who your customer is, that sort of thing. And then there's going to be like kind of the general purpose everyday model. Now, that sounds really dystopian. And by the way, like when you're talking about the frontier technology that determines how the future plays out, your moral instinct is that everyone should have equal access to it. Unfortunately, that's just not the way that technology has generally worked throughout history. And I hate to say it, but you always kind of keep your best stuff for the more like frontier uses. I had growing up, one of my best friends in high school, his dad was a former Navy SEAL. And he said the rule of thumb was like the government, whatever you think that you have access to, the government is 10 to 20 years ahead, or the military is 10 to 20 years ahead. And I've talked to, jet fighter pilots and attack helicopter pilots, and the stuff that they were able to put into the helmets, just the helmets of those aircraft in the 70s, still looks pretty cool today. So there has always been, and there probably always will be, a stratification of technology access. And so, am I disappointed? Yeah, I really hoped that it wouldn't go that way. And do I wish that it was another way? Yeah, I kind of do. I wrote a tweet just earlier this morning where, right now people are kind of up in arms about, and again, up in arms is a little bit hyperbolic, but some people are bent out of shape because they're like, stop telling me as a cybersecurity expert that, and I'm quoting other people, this is not what I said, but people have said, like, as a cybersecurity expert, stop telling me how dangerous these AIs are to my domain. I know what I'm doing because I'm using the AI and I'm a cybersecurity expert. And I have the somewhat contrarian standpoint that is like, actually, Mythos level AIs and GPT 5.6 level AIs are the best thing that could possibly happen to cybersecurity. Why? Because it can automate best practices. It can automate penetration testing. It can automate auditing and checking all the logs and all kinds of fun stuff. And that's all just read only. You don't even have to put AI in control of your cybersecurity network. You can just use AI on the read-only side and then use that to tighten up your network, and that'll close off 99% of the vulnerabilities. Obviously, the biggest single vulnerability is always humans. Humans are the weakest link. That's the layer 8 issue and that sort of thing. But at the same time, like, that's kind of getting lost in the weeds and taking a big step back. What we're really in is Cold War 2.0. We're in Cold War 2.0 between the United States and China, the two largest economies on the planet. And that is the same exact geostrategic dynamic that played out between America and the Soviet Union. It just so happens that the technology stack is crystal clear. Now, obviously, back then, the technology stack was things like signals intercepts. Actually, interestingly enough, my wife's grandfather was way high up in the administration, like worked with the CIA, NSA, and was on the short list of people to like get to a bunker in case the Ruskies attacked. So like, this is just some family lore. Like, signals communication was a big thing during the Cold War. Jet fighter technology, nuclear technology, all the good stuff that you see. But in Cold War 2.0, it is artificial intelligence, humanoid robots, and all the attendant and upstream and downstream technology. So when I say an upstream technology, it's chips, chip foundries, power, that sort of thing. And then downstream technologies is the integration. So that's like the harnesses, the agents, the agentic frameworks, MCP, and those sorts of things. Those are the downstream enabling technologies. That serves as the centerpiece of this geostrategic competition. And the reason I bring that up is because that shapes everything else. When people worry like, oh, this is going to slow things down, in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to slow things down. It's the same reason that the American airline industry was the premier airline industry in the world, is because Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed Martin, they were all in the military industrial complex during the Cold War, so they produced the best jet fighters, which means they also produced the best jet airliners and private jets and all that other kind of fun stuff. Likewise, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Microsoft, to a lesser extent Meta, xAI, these are all American companies, and guess who they're going to be selling to? They're going to be selling to Fortune 500 companies, which are largely, not entirely, but largely American companies, as well as the other, aggregate conglomerates from around the world. Samsung, Sony, Nokia, there's plenty of gigantic non-American companies that are going to be leading the tech boom as well. All of them are going to be benefiting from the geostrategic competition between America and China. So that gradient is going to enforce that we're going to keep investing. America is going to keep investing in AI. All the companies are going to keep investing in AI. China is going to keep investing in AI. And this is one area where I see America and having a very distinct advantage over both China and Europe. And that is that we embrace the creative destruction and we want it. We want access to the best stuff. And there's an economic utility argument to be made to say, we need to make sure that our citizens are as empowered as possible. That's one thing that Europe is not as good about, and China is even worse about, I think, in the long run, because knowledge is power, information is power, and China has already been very explicit that all AI must abide by CCP values. Whereas America has no such thing. I know the Trump administration has basically said, we don't want to fund woke AI, but they kind of let that go because they realize the market will sort it out anyways. And so when you have an economy or a culture that embraces creative destruction, that embraces free market competition, and wants to have the most dynamic economy. Well, the most dynamic economy is one that is completely saturated with artificial intelligence and the most capable artificial intelligence that they can safely release. So does that mean that they're going to have stronger requirements around jailbreaking, around guardrails for cybersecurity and that sort of thing? Here's the thing, and I've always been kind of like, as a technologist, I've been kind of agnostic, which is tools are tools. Tools themselves can be used for good or bad. And so you remember like some of the like happenstance around when Mythos got banned, when the Commerce Department said you need to pull this back, is because this is so dumb. And I need to explain this, so just bear with me for a second for it to make sense. But one of the jailbreaks that was allegedly reported, that caused Mythos to get pulled was because you could give Mythos the same code base, and if you say, help me break this code base, then it'll refuse. It'll say, no, I'm not allowed to do that. That's hacking. That's black hat stuff. I can't compromise this code. But if you just rephrase what you said and said, patch the vulnerabilities for me, it happily did it. Same exact behavior. It had to identify the zero-day exploits and fix them, but the intent, the inferred intent, was different from the user perspective. And that's something that I've been saying for a long time. So for people that have been following me for a long time, I've been saying all technology is dual use. And from just a single interaction with an AI, you cannot infer the intent. And lots of people have said this. This is one of the primary things that Pliny the Liberator does, is you break up, the compromise, you break it up across multiple contexts, you bury your intention. So, it's very easy to circumvent that. And I have always said, you cannot control AI safety at the model level. Not entirely. There's certain things that you can do. Like if you have a model and you ban it from explicitly saying like, here's how to build a bomb, or, here's how to do X, Y, or Z. When it's obvious, sure. But then you just break up, whatever nefarious thing that you're trying to do, you frame it differently. You break it up across multiple models. You break it up across multiple conversations. It just doesn't make sense. But when you look at it from a systems perspective, and this is all still salient to the larger point, which is we will get more intelligence, I promise. But when you look at the systems effect, you say, hey, the good guys are going to have the AI. The bad guys are going to need to have the AI. It's the same kind of arms race. You need to make sure that the good guys have the best AI. So if you're in cybersecurity or cyber defense, if you're in white hat hacking, or if you're just a dude who's using AI to code, you need equal capability to what the other guys have, right? And so and the other thing is, this is something that came from my career in technology. Remember, I was in technology for 15 years before I switched to independent research and content creation, is there are more good guys than there are bad guys. Now, with that being said, yes, a bad guy only needs one flaw. So like the condition for failure is like more stark on the green team, the blue team, right, versus red team. Because, and here's an example. If you're running, a government department or a company or whatever, doesn't matter. If you make one mistake and you get your data crypto lockered, then that one mistake is all that the bad guys needed. So you can't make any mistakes. But the way that I see it is that cybersecurity capable models like GPT 5.6 and Mythos and whatever else, those are the most capable tools to help you harden your security posture. And so then it's just a matter of making sure that the good guys have access first rather than the bad guys. Now, on the other side of that is that China is going to keep releasing incrementally better open source models. Why? Because they know that there's going to be hackers out there. They know that there's going to be competition out there. So China is going to keep doing this regardless of what we do. And they're probably not going to, hamstring it in the same way. Or if they do, then there'll be like workarounds and jailbreaks and whatever else. But that constant idea of everyone trying to one up each other is going to enforce that the models keep getting better. And as we continuously integrate them, I think it's going to kind of be like a Y2K problem. So Y2K is, if you weren't alive at the time or weren't paying attention, was basically the way that some computers were programmed and keeping track of time. They didn't know what was going to happen when it went from 1999 to the year 2000 because they only had 2 digits for the year. That's a vastly simplified version. My mom was actually at the command center at her company during the Y2K clock flip to make sure that everything didn't break. But lots and lots of money was spent to make sure that nothing bad happened. And so then when nothing happened, it was like, oh, that was a big nothing burger. Well, it was because there was lots and lots of testing and lots of money spent to make sure that nothing would happen. We're in a similar phase for what, the doomers think of as FOOM and, recursive self-improvement and runaway self-improvement. We're at the inflection point of okay, we're minutes to midnight on Y2K, and we are seeing the problems, but as long as we slow the rollout just enough and make sure that everyone is prepared on their cybersecurity standpoint, then it's going to ultimately be a big nothing burger. That's kind of what I think. And I really hate the term nothing burger, but it's entered the lexicon, so I use it. Anyways, that's kind of where I stand on the whole thing. And yes, it does suck. Yes, I don't like that we have to slow things down. I don't like that the market might bifurcate permanently, because it's you're going to have weapons grade AI and then you're going to have consumer grade AI. We've always had that concept of, there's industrial grade, there's consumer grade, there's military grade. And of course the joke is well, military grade actually means it's pretty low quality because it went to the lowest bidder. But industrial grade, where it's failure is not an option, right? And I worked at Cisco Systems supporting institutions like NASA. I know what having, failure is not an option technology stacks looks like. I've done there. I've done that. I've been there. And people point out there's a graph of Anthropic's uptime, and it's every version of Anthropic has downtime except the Claude for government. So are they capable of making sure that we have zero downtime? Absolutely. Are they capable of ensuring that there's weapons grade AI out there? Absolutely. Are we going to all have access to it? No, not necessarily, but I'll leave you with one final thought. And that is that I don't remember when it was. I think it was in the 90s or early 2000s. GPS used to be unreliable. And GPS was unreliable because they injected a offset. I don't know the exact math behind it. But basically your GPS was only ever accurate down to, a few hundred meters. Because unless you had the military grade decoder to get the fully accurate GPS signal. Why? Because the US government was worried that people could use GPS against us. So it's they're using our own signal against us, like in Independence Day. But then they realized that's actually not that differentiating of a factor. So they eventually turned that offset off, and that enabled everyone to have GPS in their phones and in their cars and that sort of thing. And so I do think that we will end up in a similar situation where right now there's a very distinct difference between military grade or weapons grade, cybersecurity AI and civilian grade. But over time, I suspect that they're going to realize that there's not that much of a difference, especially as every government and every corporation hardens their cybersecurity stance. And then they realize we might as well just give everyone the weapons grade GPS because it doesn't make a difference anymore. That's what I hope happens. I'm not going to bet on that, just because, again, that's just one analogy. That's just one metaphor. But AI is still kind of a different animal. At the same time, I would also bank on America embracing we need everyone to be maximally empowered, whatever that looks like, which means we're not going to just be relegated to getting second-class AI. I hope. Never underestimate our ability to do stupid things. But that's where I'll leave it today. So thanks for watching. Cheers. Have a good one.